What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're taking a look at the newly redesigned Inov-8 235 version 3. If my memory serves me correctly, the original ones came out in 2015. I actually had a pair of them, but they were too small for me, so I never got around to doing a review of them at the time. But what I did really like about them was the fact that they were a zero-drop training shoe. 2017 came around, I got the V2s, I did a review on them, I liked them a whole lot. They were one of the only zero drop training shoes that were like actually serious training shoes, but they were a little bit on the big side for me, so I didn't end up using them all that much after the review. It's now 2019 and we have the version 3s, which are probably the most radically changed from the original ones because they don't have that zero drop anymore. And I know a lot of barefoot minimalist shoe purists are gonna lament the change, but honestly, there's a lot of things to like about this shoe, and in my opinion, I think that this is the best training shoe that Inov-8 has ever put out. But first, we're going to talk about the design and the construction of this shoe, which also got a massive overhaul. The styling of this shoe is probably the most least offensive styling that Inov-8 has ever put out. This, in my opinion, is a pretty handsome looking shoe. It's got some pretty clean lines. The typical Inov-8 stripes that are usually like in the midsection of the shoe have been like pushed out and now just go all the way around the shoe. They're still there. It's mainly just an overlay on top of the mesh upper, which has two different types of mesh. There is a more rigid, breathable mesh on the lateral side, and then on the medial side there is a knit type material that has a stretch to it. So you actually get a really customized fit with the 235 V3s, which is really nice. In my opinion, is leagues better than the adapter fit that was on the 235 V2s. Now my foot's not quite swimming around inside of the V3s. Even though the only real structure in the upper are these overlays, they actually do a really good job in containing your foot and making sure that your foot isn't sliding around too much inside of the shoe. The tongue of the 235 V3s is very similar to the one that is found on the 290s, but instead of having like a semi-booty design, the tongue is free to move around. It's lightweight, it's breathable, and it stays in place for the most part, so you don't have to worry about that sliding around side to side. The lacing system of the shoe is a little bit more on the basic side. The eyelets connect into the overlay on the upper, and even though it's a little bit more basic, it's still really easy to get a lockdown fit with this shoe. The footbed is now double the thickness of the V2s at 6 millimeters compared to the original 3 millimeters, which I honestly do not mind because my joints are getting a little bit older and I can use that extra little bit of cushioning. It does not detract from the ground feel of the shoe at all. The midsole that they're using on the 235 V3s is now called the PowerFlow Plus midsole, and it's supposed to give you 10% better shock absorption plus 25% better energy return. Now, I can't really quantify that, but I will say that it is a lot more comfortable than the original PowerFlow midsole on the V2s. The stack height is now 7 millimeters in the front and 11 millimeters in the back compared to the 10.5 millimeters throughout the shoe. One thing that hasn't really changed pretty much at all is the outsole design. You still have Inov-8's kind of like skeletal design. You've got the Metaflex grooves all up in the front of the shoe, which expand and contract upon foot strike, and then you have the dynamic fascia band in the mid part of the shoe, which is basically Inov-8's version of a midfoot shank without having any kind of like actual plate in there, and that's supposed to help keep the shoe in motion a little bit better and smooth out your heel to toe transitions when you're running. The rubber that they're using for the gum outsole is just called Inov-8 rubber. It's nothing special like graphene, but it's never let me down as far as grip goes, and on dusty rubber flooring, I think it actually works a little bit better than graphene did. So if you're curious as to how Inov-8 names their shoes, it's actually the amount of grams the shoe weighs. But since this is a men's size 10, I weighed this in at 285 grams or 10 ounces. I think they do their measuring for the naming based off like a men's size 9. So there's where the discrepancy lies. So currently the 235 V3s only come in 2 different colorways. You have the black and gum, and then you have the white and gum. 2 very, very popular colorways. A little bit on the safe side, but I do admit that these are some pretty good looking shoes, and I do like the fact that Inov-8 used a darker style gum on the outsole of these shoes compared to like the lighter ones that are found on what Reebok and Nike have out. In the future, I hope to see some more interesting colorways, but as of right now, I think these are going to appeal to a lot of people. When it comes to sizing your 235 V3s, these on Inov-8's fit scale are the widest shoe that they make. They are a 5 on their fit scale. The original ones somehow were a 3, but I remember those ones being way wider than these shoes. The difference in width might have something to do with the fact that these just have like a knit material that gives you a more customized fit. It hugs your foot a little bit better than the original ones did, but these are still a fairly wide shoe, especially by Inov-8 standards. But when you compare them to like Metcons or Nanos, they're not really all that wide. They're still a little bit more on the narrow side, but I still think the width of these should be good enough for pretty much anybody. On top of that, the shoe is still relatively flat inside, so if you had flat feet, you should be okay with wearing the 235 V3s. When it comes to picking a size, I'm gonna say these are the most true to size shoes that Inov-8 has ever come out with. I had some issues with the 290s being a little bit too small, and then I had some issues with the 230s being a little bit too big, but these ones fit right on the money. So if you're looking to size these, just go with your normal training shoe size. I wear a size 10 in these, a size 10 in my Nanos, a size 10 in my Metcons, pretty much a size 10 in everything, and these fit me right on the money. One thing that Inov-8 has come to be known for is the fact that they always make extremely flexible shoes. If you were looking for something to work out in that promoted natural movement, the 235 V3s are probably the best training shoe that you can get. The upper moves with your feet extremely well, and I really like the fact that that new stretch material gives you a little bit more of a hug to your foot than the previous model's upper did. There are no hot spots at all throughout the whole upper, and when the shoe is on your foot, it just feels like a sock. There's really no stiffness to the PowerFlow midsole or the outsole of the shoe, so your foot is free to move as intended. Bounding movements are extremely comfortable. There's plenty of cushioning without being overdone, and the shoe is still very responsive. When it comes to running, the 235 V3s make Nanos and Metcons feel like you're running in Olympic weightlifting shoes. These are by far the most natural feeling training shoe to run in. While the cushioning is minimal because they still are a training shoe, I still think that it's plenty for any of the runs that you'll ever do in a normal training session. If you're looking to go long distances, then I would still recommend that you throw on some running shoes, but the 235s should be good for at least a couple miles. If you're into minimalist running, then you'll feel right at home in these shoes. On the flip side, one thing that Inov-8's never really been known for is their stability. They just usually are a little bit more narrow, a little bit more natural, a little bit more flexible. So all of those things don't typically add up to the most stable lifting shoes. But in the case of the 235 V3s, I feel like this is the best that Inov-8 has ever done in combining the flexibility of a shoe with stability. Since they are wide, you do get a very good base for your lifting movements, and the PowerFlow midsole is extremely responsive. My last shoe review was the Nano 9s, which I thought were an excellent lifting shoe, and I'm still on that same squat cycle that I was on. I didn't think that the 235 V3s were going to be able to handle some of the heavier weights that I've been putting up, but I put them to the test. I squatted a 3x3 of 385, which is like 90% of my 1 rep max, without any issues in the 235 V3s. Even though the midsole on this shoe is comfortable, it's still extremely responsive and power delivery is excellent. For Olympic weightlifting, the 235 V3s are the best shoe that Inov-8 has ever put out for a training shoe, but it still trails behind the Nano 9s and the Metcon 4s, and that's just for the simple fact that they're just way more flexible than those other shoes. And the outsole design is a little bit more rounded, and it allows for just a little bit more lateral movement. Foot containment is definitely better than some of the previous models, and the wide platform helps it out quite a bit. I'm not really missing the loss of any kind of external heel counter because I feel like the heel sits very well inside of this shoe. But it really just comes down to technique and practice. If this is what you're gonna be doing the majority of your lifting in, it is more than capable enough of a shoe to handle pretty much any kind of lifts that you throw at it. Excellent. The rope tech guard does an extremely good job of holding the rope, and then coming down, the shoe does not slip off your foot. So definitely passes the test. Rope tech guard doing its job, protecting the shoe. Passes the test. The 235 V3s retail for $130, which is right there in line with Nanos and Metcons. So why would you choose this shoe over some of the bigger names? The number one reason for picking this shoe over those is because it's just way more flexible. There's no comparison with how flexible this shoe is compared to the Nano 9s, the Metcon 4s, the Metcon 3s, and even the Nano 8s, which are still one of the most flexible training shoes that you can get your hands on. If you wanted something to do minimalist running in, the 235 V3s are also a very good option. Extended wear in these shoes is extremely comfortable, and like I mentioned earlier, it's like wearing just a sock when you have these shoes on. The next reason would be that you didn't like the styling of the new Metcon 5 and the Nano 9. Now, a lot of people have been putting those shoes under fire, saying that the new designs are terrible, and almost everybody that's commented on this shoe has said that it's really good looking. And like I said, I have to agree. I do think the 235s are an extremely handsome shoe. I'm bored of the colorways, but I do admit that they are a good looking shoe. Another reason to buy these shoes is if you're coming from another Inov-8 shoe and you wanted something a little bit more stable, but you didn't want to sacrifice on the flexibility. The 290s were a very good shoe, but these shoes, because of the width, are better in the stability department than the 290s were, despite even losing out on the TPU heel counter. My final say on the 235 V3s is that they are easily one of the best training shoes out right now, and besides the Nano 9s, these are probably my favorite training shoe at the moment. It really just depends on what workout I'm doing for me to choose between either of the different shoes. If I was doing more lifting, then I would pick the Nano 9s, but if I was doing more like Metcon stuff, with more plyometric based movements and more running, then I would choose the 235 V3s. So if you're looking for an alternate shoe to Nanos and Metcons, it's never been a better time to check out Inov-8. If you guys have any questions about this shoe, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that right now. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up, and I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.